All right, no, I've got, all right, the okay. Well, listen, welcome this morning. This is now the 5th in the Nobel series. So this one is going to deal with the Peace Prize, but we'll get to that in a minute. One item I wanted to bring up, a housekeeping item, but you might be interested, is that Friday this week, at least the 10th of December, that's the Nobel ceremony, and in which all of the Nobelists present their work. So you've now been through almost, well, you will have been through 5 of them. And so you might find it interesting to see it live, the ceremony. It's quite an elegant ceremony. So prize and the one coming up next week, the Literature Prize, they are linked because both deal with human rights in some way, in some fashion. Today's is an award to Maria Ressa from Philippines and Dmitry Muraton from Russia for their efforts, and I'm just quoting directly from the Nobel Committee, but to safeguard freedom of expression. You know, I thought about this morning. You know, wasn't so long ago that we took all of this for granted in our countries, North America and Europe, and these days not so sure. So on that note, David, it's all yours.
Thank you.
And you turned your volume up?
Yes. Okay, hello everybody. This is the Nobel Peace Prize, and we're starting this slightly differently than I have in the past. And we also are using quite a lot of videos in it. One of the advantages of this one is that it went to journalists. Journalists do lots of posting and are interviewed, so we can actually see and hear some of the winners. But we're starting with some of their presentations, and you'll get a much better sense of what they're like. So we'll begin with some of the past winners. And it's not always an easy road to hoe, becoming a Nobel Prize Peace winner. As we heard this morning, tragic news, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the Prime Minister of Myanmar, was arrested a little while ago for the 3rd or 4th time and was sentenced today to 4 years in prison. So the Nobel Prize in this case didn't protect her. And certainly our thoughts were with her. It looks as though the military junta there, the coup, is going to get rid of her entirely, likely dissolve her party and rule by fiat. So here is the first one that I've done like this. Abiy Ahmed, who won the Peace Prize, as you recall, for bringing peace to Ethiopia. So we say peace to Ethiopia. My God, what's gone on? It's been a disaster for the country almost since the day he got it. But my sympathies have always been with him because of the situation he faced that the world really wasn't terribly familiar with. But he got the prize for making peace with Eritrea, which is adjacent to Ethiopia. But he got into power and was able to do that after a group from Tigray, that province, had been running the country for 30 years. And they were not really willing to give it up. So when he tried to have another national election right afterwards, they wouldn't vote. And they have, in effect, separated. I'm not going to go on and on about this, but it's a little like this, as though the Parti Québécois took over Canada 30 years ago and never gave it up. And then there was finally and they were left-leaning, Front de Libération Québécois. They were the Liberation Front in Tigray province. They lost power in that election that he was elected in. And then it was a revolution. So it's only become clear now that really this is a revolution, that the central government is fighting a rebel force. So I have always had some sympathy for Ahmed, despite the starvation, the atrocities, and everything else. He was in a bad position. So now, talking about prizes not protecting you, the first journalist ever to receive a prize, and I think the only other journalist until this year, was Karl von Ossietzky. He won the Peace Prize in 1935. He was immediately arrested by the Nazis, put into a concentration camp. He had TB, he was tortured, he was abused, and died 3 years later in the camp. So no protection from the Peace Prize. So now we'll start about this year's that went to journalists whom I hope have a happier fate than Karl. I just wanted to go briefly. I did work as a journalist and just quickly outline what goes on in a newsroom, because journalism is all about the newsroom. And there are a couple of important things to remember about the newsroom. That is that it's collegiate, you're cooperating together, and it's also incredibly competitive. Journalists are very competitive amongst themselves about which stories they run, and they're competitive about other papers. They want to do well. So this is just the quickly on the titles. I won't spend too much time on it. The editor sets the tone, the managing or content editor puts the thing together, sections head run it, section heads do the sections, and it all comes together. So this is just a shot of, say, possibly a content editor talking to another editor. Here's an editorial meeting, and remember, it's collegiate, it's competitive, and they're smart and very devoted to getting a good story. You want to get a good story, whatever the aim of the publication is. So, and ultimately, the thing gets together and it comes out either in a paper or these days often as an online publication. So this is Jim Lehrer, who was a PBS news anchor for years, and he published Rules of Journalism. I'll keep copies of these and send them out afterwards if you want, and I'll also have copies of the videos that we're going to see. But essentially, do nothing he couldn't defend, don't distort, don't falsify, don't make up quotes, keep your opinion separate from straight news. And the last one, I'm not in the entertainment business. This is about information, not information. So here we go, the first of the videos. And this is the call everybody wants to get.
Hello?
Am I talking to Maria Ressa?
You are, yes.
And I'm calling you on behalf of the Norwegian Nobel Committee. And it's a great pleasure for me, Maria, to inform you that at 11 o'clock local time here in Oslo, it will be announced that you are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 2021 for your courageous fight for freedom of expression in the Philippines. And you will be sharing the prize with another candidate, which I cannot disclose the name of right now because I will need to call that person first. But I would be delighted to hear your immediate, spontaneous reaction to this news.
I'm speechless. I'm actually live on another event, but my God, thank you. Oh my gosh, this is, I'm speechless. Thank you.
So we'd all like to hear that. Here's the actual announcement.
Good morning. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2021 to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. Ms. Ressa and Mr. Muratov are receiving the Peace Prize for their courageous fight for freedom of expression in the Philippines and in Russia.
So that was the official announcement. I just thought it would be fun to actually see it. There'll be a little bit of roughness as we go through the various quotes because we'll bounce around. But in any case, these are the two publications. Rappler is an online publication in the Philippines. It was established by Maria Ressa in 2012 with a group of her journalist friends. And it's really been a site that has kept Duterte's regime its feet to the fire. It's very popular in the Philippines and has wide readership. And you'll hear more and more about it as we go along. This is the newspaper. It's a 3-time-a-week newspaper put out by Dmitry Muratov. And it's very, very popular. It has huge circulation. And the very interesting thing about it was actually founded by another Nobel Peace Prize winner with his winnings. And that is Mikhail Gorbachev, who won in 1993. So very significant connection there. And you'll hear a bit more about it later. So here is the joint announcement.
The winners of the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize have just been announced in Oslo. The award was given to 2 journalists, Maria Ressa from the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov from Russia. The Nobel Committee cited their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression in their respective countries. Ressa founded the investigative journalism website Rappler and has focused much of her work on Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's controversial and violent war on drugs.
And lasting condition.
We're just going to jump along a little in this. And we'll be doing this fairly often in this. This is an interview and more about Muratov.
The winners of the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize, the newspaper Novaya Gazeta, and its editor-in-chief and Nobel Peace Prize winner Dmitry Muratov.
Well, Dmitry Muratov is one of the founding members of Novaya Gazeta, and he's actually been its editor-in-chief as well for over 20 years, and I think an important figure in standing up to the government here, or rather criticizing it through journalism and also standing up for freedom of speech here in Russia. Now, Novaya Gazeta itself is somewhat of an institution in the country. It's a newspaper that comes out 3 times a week, and they're really known for their investigative journalism, including particularly into human rights issues and also corruption. For example, it was one of the newspapers, one of the media outlets that revealed the presence of Russian soldiers in eastern Ukraine during the war there, and also the newspaper that revealed the fact that gay people in Chechnya, in the Russian region of Chechnya, were being tortured for their sexuality. Muratov and the other journalists at Novaya Gazeta have been really uncompromising over the years in upholding their values and continuing their investigative work despite the increasing difficulties. They've received a lot of threats over the years. One journalist that I spoke to in my reporting there about the newspaper told me that it sometimes feels like they're working in a war zone or, you know, walking over a minefield, because actually 6 of the
Okay, so that gives you some taste, but as we go along, we'll see more of all of them. So they were endorsed by other journalists. It's always interesting to hear what other journalists have to say about their colleagues.
To promote the cause of independent journalism, quality journalism in front of despotic regimes, also in front of all those who weaken journalism and democracy, including maybe digital platforms and social networks.
Christophe, here I am, a journalist interviewing 3 other journalists. But sticking to the facts and not spreading disinformation is embodied into law around the world.
Oh, we're just catching up here. This is an interview with Ressa, and let's go along to another one. So we hear from a lot of them.
To promote the cause of independent journalism.
The committee actually showed you how important information is. Our information ecosystem has had an atom bomb explode, and it is continues to insidiously manipulate us. This isn't going to take one nation or one company. Part of my problems in the Philippines, these legal cases were enabled by the information operations on social media that those algorithms empowered, right? So we can't have integrity of elections in our May 2022 presidential elections unless the platforms voluntarily allow facts to surface, or
we'll be hearing a lot more about it. She is interesting in that she worked for CNN for 20 years and also continues to work with Facebook. Rappler is one of the groups that do fact checking and that take down sites that are fake, or as she calls them, they are astroturf. She calls it a fake site. She may come up with that as being astroturf. They lay an astroturf over the facts and you get the fake facts. So we have just a bit of a lag. Now, this is an important talk about why Muratov deserved the prize.
What Western journalists can learn about Dmitry Muratov winning jointly the Nobel Peace Prize is that his publication Novaya Gazeta, which you probably know best through the work of Anna Politkovskaya, who died 15 years ago this week, and she wrote over 500 articles for Novaya Gazeta, most of them about Chechnya. But while Muratov has been
just threatened to shut down Rappler. She spoke earlier today on Rappler.com after she won the Nobel Prize.
we have all long said this since 2016 that we are fighting for facts. And when we live in a world where facts are debatable, when the world's largest distributor of news prioritizes the spread of lies laced with anger and hate and spreads it faster and further than facts, then journalism becomes activism. And that's the transformation that we've gone through in Rappler, that we were on quicksand trying to figure out, how do we do what we do? How can journalists continue the mission of journalism? Why is it so difficult to continue telling the community, telling the world what the facts are, right? So in a battle for facts, I guess what this just shows is that that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee realized that a world without facts means a world without truth and trust. And if you don't have any of those things, you certainly can't conquer coronavirus. You can't conquer climate change. I've been saying this over and over, and it feels a little bit like, Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill. And when you get attacked in the process of trying to roll the rock up the hill, you just kind of dodge, you keep going. And it's a shock. But the fact that a journalist from the Philippines and a journalist from Russia won the Nobel Peace Prize tells you about the state of the world today and the state of the Philippines.
Filipina journalist Maria Ressa responding to winning the Nobel Peace Prize today. And
here we go with a similar interview, but a very, very interesting interview with a journalist that knew Muratov well. And you will hear a little bit more about some of the huge challenges that he's faced and that the paper has faced. And that will tie in with something we're going to see later on, because in fact, Muratov's association, his connection to the state in Russia is very different than the situation that Ressa finds herself in the Philippines. And in an odd way, Ressa is under more of a threat than Muratov. But as you'll hear, he has been incredibly challenged.
Is that okay?
Well, we can try.
We can try. Okay, hang on. Okay, can everybody hear David?
Can you hear me?
Yes, and you?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, all right. I apologize that these videos don't work. They're really worthwhile, and I will send you the links afterwards. I'll go through what they discuss. The woman that you see on the screen with Muratov works for The Atlantic. She and her husband were reporters in and The Nation in Russia for years and followed their career very much. And the thing you really need to know about Muratov is he's been able to report, doing investigative reporting just the way you would expect in the West. So if there's a big problem with pollution in northern Russia or Siberia, they'll send journalists out and they'll track it down and do an expose. And there've been huge pollution problems that they've revealed. But they'll also go after Chechnya and the problems that Russia has had on the border. And as a result, and this is the shocking part, Muratov has had 6 of his journalists murdered, including a very famous woman. But he's continued on, the reporters have continued on, and that was why I was talking about the importance of getting the story and how it becomes an obsession for reporters to be able to do that. So even though, and if we can see him, he's still a fairly jolly guy, which is remarkable after what he's had to go through. We'll see if we can get another slide up here. Otherwise, we'll just.
Two journalists were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, the power of anger and lies. This is an important part, just as Muratov is an investigative journalist looking at politics and pollution and that sort of thing. Ressa's and Rappler's main challenge has been dealing with the spreading of lies. And she says that that anger plus lies means misinformation that's been sent out in the Philippines on a huge scale. She shows that they started right after Duterte got into power in 2016. He established 26 fake news outlets, and they have expanded so that now there are 3,000, and they reach 30,000 people in the Philippines, 30 million people in the Philippines, and the Philippines uses the net more than anybody else. So that it becomes impossible to disentangle the truth from the lies. The fake news, the astroturfing of the news in the Philippines, in her view, has become complete. There have been 19 journalists in the Philippines murdered, along with, of course, up to 20,000 supposed drug addicts by Duterte. It's a very dangerous place to be. Maria has been charged 8 times. She's up on a charge now. And just as of yesterday, Duterte said would permit her to go to the Nobel Prize ceremony on Friday, but she's got a couple of court cases still to go. And again, the protection of the prize is limited. So again, her main drive in life is to fight fake news and to show how it corrupts everything that it touches. Well, let's see if this works. This is a good interview.
So
with
why should you
Frontline.
care about what happens in the Philippines, right? For one, we spend the most time on the internet, more than 10 hours a day. We spend the most time on social media globally. And as we found out, lies laced with anger and hate spread fastest. When you only look at content, it's a whack-a-mole game. I want to figure out what the lie is, then look at the network that spreads the lies. That's the nervous system. We started looking at one account that was attacking all journalists are corrupt. One account that had 25 followers. They were all following each other. We fact-checked every single item. These were all fake accounts. We began to count and found that 26 fake accounts can influence up to 3 million other accounts. 3 million. I think the first attacks, this word prostitutes, you can even track this word. Molka Uson starts to popularize prostitutes. I think Pinoy picks it up. Then it's repeated 1 million times to make you distrust institutions, to shift the way you think. In May 2017, we did a story on the transcript of Trump's call with President Duterte. Rappler just made the Philippines a legitimate target of North Korean nuclear missiles. It's laughable, but people believe it. It jumped to, I can smell an arrest and possible closure of Rappler.com. Then from there, we go to sexualized attacks, fuel misogyny. Women are a favorite, easy target.
So that gives you some sense of what they're up against. Here's CTV covering it.
Welcome back, everybody. When Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte was elected into office in 2016, a fatal war on drugs was waged. And with that, also a war on democracy, a war on press freedom.
Sorry, that was me. That wasn't the system. I'd like to get CTV back here. There we go.
Welcome back, everybody. When Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte was elected into office in 2006, cuts. It is our honor and our pleasure to welcome all the way from the Philippines, the one and only Maria Ressa. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, during this years-long war against drugs, Duterte has repeatedly threatened drug dealers and users with death. And the Philippine police have admitted to killing between 6,000 and 8,000 people, but human rights groups put that number closer to 27,000. So we want to know, what is it like day to day for the people who are living through this right now?
It's normalization of violence. You know, this is one of the things that most shocked me. And this has not been going on for a year. It's been going on for 4 years, right? And you know, one of the things that truly shocked me was to hear Filipinos say it's okay to kill for press freedom. If we don't stand up for the values of democracy, for the values of human rights, what do we stand for, right? So that's one. And I think the second thing is, I've learned that when times are really bad, your community gathers around you. I think this is another time for civil society to try to create what civic engagement looks like in the age of social media. And then
this is a Harvard lecture which she gave. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it, but I think we should probably just keep moving along, although we've got a little time. Let's see if we can look a little bit of this.
And a warm welcome to everyone joining us tonight in our virtual audience. It is
platforms to take that from you. Because it's kind of like you went to a psychologist and the psychologist then said, hey, I got his deepest secrets. Who will pay me for it? Right? That's kind of what this machine learning, and then artificial intelligence will come in and then serve it up in that ad. This new ad world is also very different from the ad world that I grew up in broadcast journalism. You know, it is not micro-targeted. I cannot show different people on our Zoom call different versions of reality because I want to manipulate you. So think about it like that. Like these things that were used for marketing are now used by geopolitical power to manipulate you. Thank you. Different versions of reality because I want to manipulate you. So think about
that's worth considering. Facebook particularly has essentially put everybody, practically everyone else, out of business. They have this huge, they made $9 billion in the most recent quarter, and they've used it to increase the number of hits. And this goes back to the lies, because they find that fake news gets more hits than there's more anger, and you get more hits from negative stuff than you do from positives. But so this is a long lecture about that, and I hope some of you will watch some of it when it comes through.
And a warm welcome to everyone.
Okay, fake news. What happens in the States with fake news? It's just as pervasive. We've seen it practically, perhaps kill thousands of people with anti-vaccine, which consists of largely news. I'm not blaming any anti-vaxxer gets convinced by it. It can be very convincing, but it has had the effect of dumbing down the population. That fewer now get vaccinated than should, and the States continues on this terrible trajectory of death. It's going to certainly head to 800,000 and 900,000 probably. Now, Trump turned this around, and things are not as bad in the States as they are, of course, in the Philippines, but he turned it around by calling legitimate newscasts fake. So in his mind, everybody is fake except people that agree with him. So it's a little twist on the power of fake news. And this is what he told a pack people recently. And remember, the fake news he's talking about is CNN, it's PBS, it's NBC, it's the New York Times. So this is how Trump puts it. Well, maybe we're not going to hear from our leader. This probably won't work, which is probably a relief. We won't have to hear that man. But what he says is that the fake news, that's all the legitimate news, all the people that we watch and trust, are in fact the enemy of the people. So he calls CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, all the places that we count on fighting fake news, he calls them fake news. And it's a very dangerous precedent.
I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
That is an incredibly dangerous statement. And once that is multiplied millions of times and it's peppered at a huge portion of the population where they get their news, many Americans get all their news from Facebook. It's an incredibly dangerous thing to say. Well, we can see what she has to say about.
Our Constitution says that, you know, it's patterned after the United States Constitution. There's a Bill of Rights.
Okay, what have we not seen? Well, we haven't seen very much of Muratov, and there's a sequence in here that is very interesting because we see him being interviewed along with Putin. And it's interesting again to contrast the problem that Maria Ressa is having with Muratov and Putin, who are very collegiate and friendly with one another and sort of bartering back and forth. And you realize that the nature of Novaya Gazeta, which he started with, again, the funding from Gorbachev's Peace Prize winning, has worked its way into the society in a way that so far Maria Ressa has just not been successful at doing. I have some stills at the end of the presentation, which I'd like to get to, so we'll try to finish up there if we can move through this. It's coming. Thank you very much for your patience. I apologize. And I certainly have had some culpability in this. At one point, I turned off my machine. So this is giving you some idea of what they're like, I hope. We'll come to some stills at the end of this, and I can go through them. This is Muratov actually talking about how he investigates reporters, how he sends them out, how he gets the story. And the interesting story that he tells is one of the things, just to give you an idea of his relationship with the Kremlin. They suspected that ministers in the government were taking private planes. They weren't taking commercial flights. They had their own air force in effect. So they sent out reporters. They got people in all the airports all over Russia taking photographs showing these ministers coming off their private planes. So that's the kind of thing that, and the Kremlin was mortified and so on, and they all have to fly commercial now. So this is the Putin and Muratov exchange. We'll try to just move through it. Okay, these are going to be stills, so this should run fine, really, right up until the end. We think that journalists are only killed not in North America, not in, certainly in the States. In fact, you may recall in Maryland 3 or 4 years ago, there were 5 journalists murdered at the Capitol paper there. And it was just by someone who had a malcontent who didn't like what the paper had said about him, went in with a gun and shot and killed 5 of them. This is a photograph from the Daily News. You probably can recognize the Daily Telegram in Britain, and it ran all over the world. This is a shot of the gunman who went in and shot the journalists at Charlie Hebdo, the cartoon magazine. So this is them actually killing people. And here are those French journalists that were murdered. And this, of course, perhaps takes the cake. Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered at the Saudi Arabian embassy in Istanbul. Shocking, And it's kind of been accepted. We're not enemies of Saudi Arabia. And here they kill their journalists. So you could truly wonder why anyone would possibly, it's got to be the most dangerous profession. You wonder why anyone would want to go into it. And it really has to do with people like Muratov and Ressa who want to know the truth. They genuinely want to know what the facts are, what the truth is. And that is the power of journalists. And God forbid that we ever lose its significance and importance, and have these kind of inspired idealists who are willing to go out there and tell the truth about what really is happening. Particularly in these times, it's been exasperated since the Trump regime. This is a video, so we're not going to see it, but it's Ressa on suggesting how on how democracy could be fixed, and no surprise, it means we just have to be vigilant. We have to pay attention. We can't just let things go. We have to be on guard against astroturfing, as she calls it, which is covering up good news, real facts with fakes. So I apologize. I hope this gave you some sense of what heroes these two winners were this year. And again, something that Bill mentioned this morning, the Nobel Peace Prize is no protection against the dangers that journalists face. So thank you very much. I again apologize for the up and downness of all this. I will put the links on and give them to Debbie so that you can ask for copies and look at them with your leisure. And I assure you, it would be very much worth your while. So thank you so much, everyone.